Welcome to the Strategy Sync YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. So, usually when you think about what is actually real, there is this underlying expectation of solidity.
Right.
Like, just think about it for a second. You walk into a room, you knock on a wooden table, and you feel that hard surface against your knuckles. You hear that dull thud, and your brain just points at it and says, there it is. That's reality. That is the baseline.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is deeply comforting. We evolved to interact with the physical world exactly as it appears to our senses.
Yeah.
Visible, easily categorized, and most importantly, stable.
Right, stable. But then, you step into the world of quantum physics or advanced neuroscience or the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, and suddenly that solid wooden table starts to look, well, incredibly murky.
It really does.
It's like the X-ray machine for reality is completely broken. You look closer, and the wood is just atoms, right? And the atoms are mostly empty space.
Exactly.
And the particles are just probabilities.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of a philosophical hall of mirrors. You start realizing that the table isn't really a solid thing at all. It is just vibrating energy that your sensory organs pick up, and then they translate that into electrical signals, and then your brain sort of interprets it as wood.
Right.
So the solidity is just a useful illusion rendered by your mind, and once you pull that thread, you are just left wondering what the universe actually is at its core.
And that profound, almost dizzying question is really our mission today. We are doing a deep dive into a book published in 2026 called The Infinity Machine. Demis Hassabis, DeepMind, and the Quest for Superintelligence by Sebastian Mallaby.
It's a fascinating book.
It really is. And I want to set expectations for you right now, because we are not just going to talk about some typical Silicon Valley business startup today.
No, not at all.
We are not talking about like the next shiny app on your phone or an algorithm designed to just maximize ad clicks. We are unpacking the mind of the man who arguably spearheaded the artificial general intelligence revelation.
I think that framing is crucial because Demis Hassabis is an absolute outlier in the tech ecosystem. If you look at his resume, it reads like, I don't know, a piece of science fiction.
Totally.
He was a diminutive former child chess prodigy from North London, then a highly successful video game designer while still a teenager.
Which is insane.
Right. Then he gets a neuroscience PhD, and as of 2024, he's a Nobel laureate in chemistry.
Just a casual resume?
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, he didn't set out to build artificial intelligence just to generate wealth. The book makes it abundantly clear he is literally trying to build an infinity machine.
Infinity machine. I mean, even just hearing that phrase gives you this massive sense of scale. But what does that actually mean in practice, like functionally?
Well, it is a theoretical system that's capable of finding patterns in an absolute infinity of data.
Okay.
It's an artificial intelligence so advanced and so generalized that it can act as a universal solver. So the goal isn't to write a better email or, generate a funny picture of a cat. The goal is to unravel the fundamental mysteries of the universe. We are talking about everything from the behavior of subatomic particles to the very nature of human consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah, Hassabis is building this machine to essentially decode the source code of reality itself.
So we are going to explore how this kid, who was just obsessed with science fiction, ended up clashing with libertarian billionaires, winning a Nobel Prize for a breakthrough in biology, and ultimately wrestling with the terrifying sweetness of inventing something that could literally outthink the human race.
It's quite the journey.
It really is.
Okay.
We're going to look at what happens when a singular mind decides the only way to understand the cosmos is to build a digital god. And to really grasp the audacity of this, we have to look at the psychological engine driving him. And that starts with his childhood.
Right. To understand Hassabis, you really have to understand the environment that forged him. Growing up, he wasn't just smart. He was operating on an entirely different cognitive frequency. He was a chess prodigy, competing at the absolute highest levels at a very young age. But more remarkably, he became a 5-time world champion at something called the Mind Sports Olympiad.
Okay, I have to pause you there because the Mind Sports Olympiad is just fascinating. For those of you who don't know, this isn't just like a weekend chess club or a local spelling bee. This is essentially an extreme decathlon for the brain.
That's the perfect way to describe it. It's this intense, multidisciplinary competition where competitors play everything from chess to Go to backgammon to incredibly obscure strategy games, often back-to-back, and to win it 5 times. That requires a mind that doesn't just memorize specific rules for one game, but a mind that understands the deep underlying structure of all strategic systems.
Right, it's meta-strategy.
Exactly. It requires a highly abstract, highly adaptable form of intelligence. And while he was doing this, keep in mind, this is before he had even finished his formal education, he was also designing commercially successful video games.
Which, again, is just wild to think about.
But if you really want to find the true psychological key to Hassabis, the book points to a discovery he made much later, during his neuroscience PhD. It's a classic science fiction novel by Orson Scott Card called Ender's Game.
Oh, Ender's Game.
Yeah.
Man, if you haven't read it, the premise is intense. It's about a brilliant, socially isolated child named Ender Wiggin. And he is literally taken from his family by the military and placed in a space battle school.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And these adults put him through extreme, relentless mental testing and manipulation. The other kids bully him out of pure jealousy, and the entire weight of saving humanity from a looming alien invasion is placed squarely on this little child's shoulders. It is a massive psychological burden.
And how Hassabis reacted to that book, well, it tells you everything you need to know about his internal landscape.
How so?
The author notes that when Hassabis asked his wife to read it, her reaction was totally normal. She felt deep pity for Ender. She saw a boy who was robbed of his childhood, tragically burdened with an apocalyptic mission.
Right, as any normal person would.
Exactly. But Hassabis, he didn't pity Ender. He identified with him intensely.
Wait, he saw himself as the child soldier carrying the weight of the species. I mean, that is a wild level of self-identification.
He saw the direct parallels. I mean, like, Ender Hassabis was a diminutive boy genius. He knew intimately the distinct kind of social isolation that comes with prodigious talent, when your brain is just moving so fast that you struggle to relate to your peers at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he, too, had undergone extreme mental testing and ranking throughout his entire youth in the chess world. But most importantly, he shared that all-consuming burden.
Right.
He genuinely felt a responsibility to make a monumental mark on the universe. The book reveals that he harbored an ambition to surpass his all-time scientific heroes, Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein.
No pressure.
Right. Not just to be a good scientist, but to be the one who finally figures out the complete fabric of reality.
So just imagine carrying that around in your head every single day. Imagine waking up and feeling that your work isn't just a career or, a way to pay the mortgage, but a literal species-level mission where the clock is always ticking.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
How does a person even function with that kind of self-imposed pressure? Because according to the book, his co-founder at DeepMind, Shane Legg, describes Hassabis's work ethic as an unbelievable determination. We are talking about working demanding executive office hours and then going home and working a second night shift from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Yeah, that Ender-like endurance is the absolute engine of DeepMind. Hassabis explicitly told the author that if you're trying to solve humanity's grandest problems and understand the nature of reality, you simply do not have any time to waste.
Wow.
He sleeps, eats, and breathes this mission. Aside from being a massive fan of the Liverpool Football Club, he basically has no hobbies. It is just the mission, 24 hours a day.
Which, honestly, makes his early career in video games seem almost paradoxical. Because before he was trying to solve the universe, he was programming digital theme parks.
Right.
He worked for a famously eccentric and highly demanding game designer named Peter Molyneux at a studio called Bullfrog. And this is where the blueprint for everything that follows kind of gets drawn. Because you think about it, programming a simulation game at age 17 is essentially a sandbox for building a digital reality.
It was the ultimate training ground. Hassabis was a lead programmer on a game called Theme Park. And to understand the leap he made here, we kind of have to look at how games were built back in the early 1990s. They ran on what computer scientists call finite state machines.
Okay, that sounds like some heavy jargon. Let's break down what a finite state machine actually is in the context of a video game.
Sure. It basically just means the characters in the game had a very limited, rigid menu of behaviors based on simple if-then rules. So if an enemy sees the player, attack. If the enemy's health is low, run away. It's finite. It's totally predictable. It doesn't allow for surprise or genuine complexity.
Right.
But Molyneux, the studio head, wanted to push the absolute limits of that architecture. He wanted the digital visitors in this virtual theme park to exhibit complex, emergent behaviors that actually felt alive.
And Hassabis, this precocious teenager, was the one who actually had to write the code to make that happen.
Yep.
He programmed the game's simulation so deeply that the digital entities had physiological variables.
Yes.
Like if a player decided to put extra salt on the digital French fries sold at a park concession stand, the virtual visitors who ate them would actually experience an internal variable of thirst.
Yeah.
And as a result, the sales at the digital soft drink stands would skyrocket.
It's brilliant.
Or if a player built a roller coaster that went too fast and was too scary, the digital riders would experience a nausea variable, and they would literally vomit in the park.
Exactly. He was giving lines of code a physiological and emotional response. He was instilling nerves, happiness, sadness, and nausea into digital entities.
Wow.
And the environment they were working in fueled this kind of experimentation. He and the team were basically living in a coding commune at Molyneux's eccentric country house. They were working day and night, constantly blurring the lines between raw programming and deep philosophy.
Yeah.
Hassabis later described this period as feeling the absolute thrill of unbridled creation.
I can completely see how that would warp your perspective, but, in the best way possible. If you spend your formative years building a simulated universe with code, and you control the physics, the desires, and the behaviors of the entities inside it, you start to look at our own universe a little differently.
Absolutely.
Because if a computer can simulate a basic reality, the logical leap is that maybe reality itself is just complex information waiting to be computed.
That feedback loop is exactly what happened. In fact, Molyneux later gave Hassabis a copy of a massively influential Pulitzer-winning book by Douglas Hofstadter called Gödel, Escher, Bach.
Oh, yeah.
That book is a very dense, brilliant exploration of how meaning and intelligence can emerge from meaningless symbols. It essentially argues that biology is an information processing system. It posits that code, if structured correctly, could eventually do absolutely whatever the human brain could do.
So the theme park game wasn't just a job. It was essentially proof of concept. Hassabis realized early on that to rewrite reality, or even to master it, he first had to understand what reality was actually made of.
Right.
Which led him away from the game industry and into a massive philosophical epiphany. Because before you can build an infinity machine, you need a blueprint of how the universe works.
And this brings us to the three massive intellectual pillars that really structured Hassabis's worldview. We just touched on the third, which is Hofstadter, but the first two are equally vital. First, he was deeply influenced by the legendary Nobel laureate physicist Richard Feynman. Feynman famously wrote a phrase on his blackboard that became a total mantra for Hassabis. What I cannot build, I do not understand.
Now, I want to push back on that Feynman quote, or at least play devil's advocate for a second, because it sounds a bit extreme to me. What I cannot build, I do not understand. If Hassabis wanted to understand human intelligence, which is the ultimate mystery, why couldn't he just study it?
Well,
Like we have fMRI machines, we have neurobiology, we have cognitive psychology. Why is building it the only valid path to understanding it?
it comes down to the concept of emergent properties. You can study a single neuron under a microscope all day long, but a single neuron doesn't have a thought. It doesn't write a symphony. The intelligence is an emergent property of billions of neurons interacting in a complex system. Physics explains the external world particles, gravity, stars. Neuroscience explains the physical mechanics of the internal world synapses and brain chemistry. But Hassabis realized that observation just isn't enough to bridge the gap between chemistry and consciousness.
I see.
To truly grasp how intelligence emerges from matter, scientists would have to build an artificial analog from the ground up. Building the machine was the only true way to verify that we actually understand the mechanics of the mind. So for him, AI's profit-making potential was entirely secondary. It was fundamentally a tool for scientific enlightenment.
Which perfectly tees up the second massive influence, the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant.
Kant argued something that completely upended classical philosophy. The mind interprets the world, or taking it a step further, the mind actually creates the reality we experience. Hassabis took this to heart and deduced that neuroscience, the internal world, actually trumps physics, the external world.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there. Neuroscience trumps physics. That sounds like a massive leap. Physicists deal with the fundamental laws of the universe. How does Hassabis justify placing the human brain above the laws of gravity or quantum mechanics?
Because intelligence is the very mechanism through which we perceive that gravity or those mechanics. The stuff physicists study matter, energy, time, is ultimately mediated through the information processing happening in our brains.
Oh, I see.
If our brains process data differently, our entire concept of physics would change. Therefore, the processing engine, the mind, is the primary lens.
Okay, let's use an analogy to make this abstract content idea hit home for you. The book mentions Hassabis loves the brain in a jar thought experiment, which is basically the philosophical premise of the movie The Matrix.
Yes, exactly.
If you take a human brain, keep it alive in a jar, hook its neural pathways up to a supercomputer, and feed it ones and zeros that perfectly simulate the sight of a sunset over the ocean, the smell of salt water, the feeling of sand, well, that brain believes it is at the beach. Its reality is the beach. So how do we know our current reality isn't just a simulation? How do we know that our consciousness isn't just ones and zeros, entirely divorced from whatever physical base reality exists out there?
That exact question drove his academic work, and it brings us to his time at Cambridge University, where he had these small group tutorials that he reverently called Nirvana sessions.
Nirvana sessions, wow.
Yeah, he studied under a brilliant professor named John Dogman, who introduced him to Claude Shannon's information theory. Shannon is the mathematician who essentially birthed the digital age by defining information not as facts or data, but mathematically as the opposite of uncertainty.
So if information is the reduction of uncertainty, what was the grand epiphany Hassabis took away from these Nirvana sessions?
The grand epiphany was a complete inversion of how we view the cosmos. Hassabis concluded that information is the fundamental unit of reality. It supersedes matter. It supersedes energy.
Really?
Yes. If you look at the behavior of subatomic particles, the flow of thermal energy, or even the firing of human consciousness, they are all, at their core, just examples of information processing. And if information is the foundational brick and mortar of the universe, then computation is the physical mechanism through which reality operates and derives meaning.
Okay, I see the through line now. If reality is just information, and computation is how you process it, then building the ultimate computer is equivalent to building the ultimate reality decoding device.
Exactly.
But there was a massive technological roadblock in the late 90s and early 2000s, right? The computers of that era couldn't compute the way human brains do.
It was a massive wall. Human-designed computers were incredibly fast calculators, but they were built entirely on first-order logic. This means deductive programming. You, the programmer, give a computer an inflexible, unambiguous rule. For example, you code, all birds can fly. And then you ask the computer if a sparrow can fly, and it uses deduction to say yes. But as we know, the real world is infinitely messy. Penguins are birds, but they don't fly. Ostriches don't fly.
Right, humans don't walk around using strict deductive logic spreadsheets to navigate the day.
Exactly.
We don't identify a dog by running down a rigid checklist of anatomical features. We see a mess of pixels, light, shadow, fur, movement, context, and we instantly recognize the dog. We hear a sarcastic tone of voice and know that the person means the exact opposite of the words they are saying. We navigate the world using complex pattern recognition.
And the technical term for that pattern recognition is induction. It is the ability to take in messy, incomplete, unstructured data and derive general truths or probabilities from it. Hassabis, along with his university friend David Silver, realized that the entire field of AI was stuck in a dead end because symbolic programming involved feeding inflexible rules into inflexible machines. You can't get fluid, adaptable intelligence out of that architecture. They realized the future required machines that could learn inductively, just like a child does, by experiencing a near infinity of unstructured data and finding the patterns themselves.
So to bring it back to the beginning, Hassabis wasn't trying to build a robot maid or a really smart digital assistant. He was trying to build a lens to see the matrix. He wanted an infinity machine that could take an infinity of data, find the hidden laws governing that data, and act as a meta-solution to any problem in the universe.
Exactly. He viewed this inductive AI as the ultimate description language for the messiness of biology and nature, just as mathematics had been the perfect description language for physics. But having this beautiful philosophical blueprint is one thing. Building the infinity machine requires vast amounts of capital, perfect timing, and a team of co-founders who actually believe the impossible is imminent.
Which brings us to the forging of DeepMind and the concept of the singularity. Because as profound as Hassabis's ideas were, you can't just walk into a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, sit down at the boardroom table and say, "Hi, I'd like a multi-million-dollar seed round to build a digital god that will decode the universe.
No, you definitely cannot. Venture capitalists traditionally prefer software as a service business models over cosmic enlightenment.
Yeah, understandably.
But the journey of DeepMind officially starts with a very fateful, almost cinematic elevator ride. Hassabis was back at University College London, working at the Gatsby unit to finish his PhD in neuroscience. He stepped into an elevator with a guy he recognized from around the building but hadn't formally met, Shane Legg.
Right.
Legg had a pronounced New Zealand accent, was carrying a suitcase, and casually mentioned to Hassabis that he was off to New York to attend the Singularity Summit.
The singularity. This is a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot in sci-fi movies and tech blogs. But what does it actually mean in the context of this book and these founders?
The singularity is a concept heavily popularized by the inventor and futurist Ray Kurzweil. It refers to a hypothetical future tipping point. Kurzweil observed that computing power was doubling roughly every 2 years, a principle known as Moore's law. Because of this, computing power is on an exponential curve.
Let's explain exponential growth for a second, because human brains are famously bad at visualizing it. It's like the lily pad analogy, right?
Yes.
If a lily pad on a pond doubles in size every day, and it takes 30 days to cover the entire pond, on what day is the pond only half covered? The answer is day 29.
Right.
Looks like absolutely nothing is happening for weeks, and then suddenly, boom, it explodes.
That is exactly the dynamic. Kurzweil believed that once this exponential computing power allows machines to draw even with human intelligence, artificial general intelligence, or AGI, the machines will be smart enough to improve their own code without human help. They will iterate on themselves in minutes rather than years. At that point, the growth curve goes completely vertical. Their capability explodes to infinity. That event horizon where human comprehension can no longer keep up with machine intelligence is the singularity.
So Shane Legg was a true believer, heading to a summit dedicated to this explosive event horizon. And then you had the third member of the founding team, the Gang of Three, Mustafa Suleyman, universally known as Moose.
Right.
Suleyman brought a completely different energy. He wasn't a computer scientist. He was an activist. He wanted to drive massive social change, but he was deeply frustrated by how incremental and slow traditional activism was.
Suleyman saw the exhausting limits of trying to change the world one policy or one charity at a time. Hassabis pitched him a mind-blowing alternative. He told Suleyman that if he really wanted to improve the world, AGI was the ultimate force multiplier.
How so?
In standard activism, you put 1 unit of human effort in and you get 1 unit of social good out. But with AGI, you put 1 unit of effort into building the machine, and the machine outputs 1,000,000 units of solutions.
It's the ultimate Archimedean lever to move the world. So in 2010, the three of them officially found DeepMind in London. You have Hassabis, the visionary scientific architect, Legg, the singularity theorist analyzing the risk and timelines, and Suleyman, the pragmatic social impact driver. But raising the money to actually build this was absolutely brutal.
It was.
They eventually pitched Peter Thiel and his Founders Fund, who were known for being aggressive libertarian contrarians.
Yeah.
And I want to set the scene here so you understand the sheer audacity required.
Yeah.
It is 2010. Silicon Valley is completely obsessed with mobile apps, social media, and the sharing economy. They're looking for the next Instagram or Uber.
Yeah.
And Demis Hassabis walks into these VC pitch meetings and effectively says, we aren't building a photo-sharing app, we are building a Manhattan Project for AI.
And the reaction was mostly eye rolls. The mainstream scientific establishment at the time viewed human-like AI as decades, if not centuries, away. Many considered it essentially a crank theory. Yeah. But DeepMind was looking investors in the eye and promising to build an omniscient machine that would eventually be smart enough to mine asteroids, cure all human diseases, and bring about a literal post-scarcity world.
Hold on. A post-scarcity world. Like the sci-fi author Ian Banks's Culture series. For context, that series features a galactic civilization where superintelligent AI minds manage entire planets, providing such unimaginable abundance that no human ever has to work, suffer, or lack for anything, and people just pursue art and travel the stars. Are you telling me that was the actual pitch to venture capitalists?
That was the vision driving the founders, and it bled into their pitches. Thiel eventually invested, primarily because he loved how intellectually contrarian the idea was compared to the rest of the Valley. But even Founders Fund viewed DeepMind as a highly risky speculative science experiment. The friction between DeepMind's grand, almost utopian scientific aspirations and the venture capitalist demand for a commercial product became obvious very quickly. DeepMind nearly ran out of money multiple times. The book details how Hassabis was having terrifying flashbacks to his early 20s when his own independent video game company, Elixir, went bust.
It's a classic startup nightmare, but with the stakes of the universe on the line. They realized they needed incredibly deep pockets, and more importantly, they needed an insane amount of computer processing power to make this inductive AI actually work. A startup budget wasn't going to cut it.
No, it wasn't.
To fund this utopian dream, DeepMind needed cash, leading them straight into the arms of a tech behemoth. And this sets the stage for their first jaw-dropping public victories.
By late 2013, DeepMind had achieved something remarkable. They had created an AI agent that could play classic Atari video games like Space Invaders and Breakout. But the crucial part is how it played. They didn't program the rules of the games into the AI. They just fed the AI the raw pixels on the screen and the game's score and told it to maximize the score. It learned purely through trial and error.
Incredible.
This massive leap caught the attention of Google's leadership, specifically Larry Page and Sergey Brin. In early 2014, Google bought DeepMind for a staggering $650 million.
The $650 million for a company with virtually no revenue. And Hassabis, showing his strategic brilliance, managed to negotiate unprecedented autonomy during the acquisition. He insisted on keeping the company headquartered in London, thousands of miles away from Silicon Valley's hype cycle.
Yeah, that was huge.
He even went so far as to ban standard Googlers from casually entering the DeepMind office. You had to have a special key pass to get in. It was a fortress of research.
That autonomy was non-negotiable for Hassabis. He knew that if they got sucked into Google's corporate machinery, they'd end up optimizing search algorithms instead of building AGI. The isolation allowed them to focus completely on their core technological breakthrough, reinforcement learning, or RL.
Okay, let's break down reinforcement learning because it is the engine of everything that follows. It was inspired by an academic named Richard Sutton, right? Explain the actual mechanics of how RL works.
RL is elegantly simple in concept. It mimics how biological organisms learn. Imagine you drop a mouse in a maze with a piece of cheese. The mouse explores. If it hits a dead end, it receives negative reinforcement, wasted energy, no food. If it finds the cheese, it receives positive reinforcement, reward. RL algorithms do exactly this in digital environments.
Oh, I see.
The machine is given a goal, and it interacts with a closed environment. It tries a random action. If it gets closer to the goal, the mathematical weights of that decision pathway are strengthened. It fine-tunes its behavior over millions or billions of iterations. It balances exploration, trying new random things with exploitation, using the paths it already knows work.
So it's literally digital trial and error at superhuman speed. Which brings us to the legendary 2016 AlphaGo match in Seoul, South Korea. DeepMind decided to build an RL system to play the ancient Chinese board game Go. Now, why Go? Chess was solved by IBM's Deep Blue in the 90s, so why was Go considered the holy grail of AI?
Because the complexity of Go is mathematically staggering. In chess, on any given turn, a player has maybe 20 to 30 possible legal moves. In Go, the board is much larger, and a player might have 200 possible moves.
Wow.
Because the branching possibilities multiply exponentially with every turn, the total number of possible board configurations in Go is greater than the number of atoms in the observable universe.
That is hard to even fathom.
You cannot use a supercomputer to calculate every possible outcome. It's literally impossible. Human masters of Go rely on years of study, feeling, and a deeply intuitive sense of the board's shape.
Which means an AI couldn't just use brute force math. It had to develop something resembling intuition.
Yeah.
DeepMind pitted their system, AlphaGo, against Lee Sedol, who was essentially the Roger Federer of the Go world, a revered human champion. And the focal point of this entire event, the moment that sent shockwaves through the scientific community, occurred in Game 2 with something called Move 37.
Move 37 is a defining moment in the history of technology. AlphaGo placed a black stone on the right-hand side of the board. It was a move so alien, so completely contrary to thousands of years of human Go theory, that the world's top human experts thought it was a mechanical glitch.
The book describes the live broadcast, which is incredible. Michael Redmond, a top-ranked Western Go player, was doing the live commentary for the English feed. When he saw the move AlphaGo chose, he physically placed a stone on his commentary board, stared at it, and then literally removed it, muttering, "No, that can't be right. That's a mistake."
And Lee Sedol, the human champion sitting across from the machine, was completely paralyzed. He actually left the room.
Seriously?
Yes. When he came back, he took 12 agonizing minutes to respond to that single move. He had never seen a strategy like it in his entire life. It looked like a terrible error, but it wasn't.
Right.
AlphaGo's value network, the part of the AI evaluating the probability of winning from any given board state, had calculated that placing the stone exactly there would exert influence on a battle happening on the opposite side of the board 50 moves later. And it was right. More than 100 moves later, that specific placement proved decisive. AlphaGo won the game and eventually the series.
I really want to unpack the psychological impact of this. Why does a board game matter so much? I mean, it's just a game, right?
Because it dismantled a fundamental human illusion. Before AlphaGo, humans comforted themselves by believing that a game as incredibly complex and abstract as Go required human intuition. We believed there was a spark, a human magic, a creative feeling that cold silicon processors could never, ever replicate.
Oh, wow.
AlphaGo proved that what we romantically call intuition can actually be reverse engineered. It proved that intuition is just incredibly complex subconscious pattern recognition, and an AI can do it better.
It proved Hofstadter's Gödel, Escher, Bach was right all along. Human intuition is not magical, it's mechanical. And the existential dread that followed was palpable. I mean, think about it. How would you feel if a machine effortlessly mastered a skill you spent 40 years perfecting and it executed it in a way your human brain couldn't even comprehend?
The fallout was deeply emotional. The Korean champion Lee Sedol publicly apologized to the human race after his losses. He admitted he felt a profound sense of powerlessness.
That's heartbreaking.
Thor Grapel, a DeepMind scientist, articulated the feeling of interacting with this kind of superhuman intelligence perfectly. He said, "At first it looks harmless, then it's just completely dominating. We don't understand the mechanics, the tactics, the strategies. We just know that it is in control."
That quote gives me chills. We just know that it is in control. But while AlphaGo was a massive PR victory and proved AI could master a closed system with strict rules, Hassabis' true goal was never just to win board games. He wanted to use AI to unlock the messy, fuzzy physical reality of nature itself,
Right.
which transitions us to a critical divergence in the AI industry, the language blind spot versus the elegance of biology.
This is where the narrative really splits, and the intense rivalry between DeepMind and OpenAI takes center stage. DeepMind was completely focused on reinforcement learning agents interacting with simulated environments, learning physics, learning rules. Meanwhile, OpenAI, which was backed by billions from Microsoft, was making a massive concentrated bet on large language models, or LLMs. And ironically, they were doing this using the transformer neural network architecture that researchers at Google had actually invented.
Right. The transformer is the T in ChatGPT. It's brilliant at predicting the next word in a sequence. But Hassabis was initially highly skeptical of these ungrounded language models. Why? Because of a philosophical hurdle known as the grounding problem. He believed that language alone was too disconnected from physical reality to ever achieve true artificial general intelligence.
Hassabis used a very grounded, practical thought experiment to explain his skepticism to his team. He'd point to a glass sitting on a table and ask, if an AI reads all of Wikipedia, every text ever written about a glass, would it truly understand that if you push this glass off the table, it's going to smash? Would it intuitively understand the weight of it or the fragility?
That's a great point.
His point was that reading text about a thing is fundamentally different from experiencing the physics of a thing. He believed an AI needed to interact with spatial reality, not just process symbols about it.
So while OpenAI was busy scraping the internet to teach AI how to mimic human conversation, DeepMind pivoted their massive computational power towards solving one of the greatest, most intractable mysteries in biology: protein folding.
Yes, the AlphaFold project. This is the monumental breakthrough that ultimately won Hassabis the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It tackled a mystery that had plagued science for half a century, known as Christian Anfinson's 1972 conjecture.
Break that down for us.
To understand why this matters, you have to know that proteins are the molecular machines of life. They are made of chains of amino acids. Anfinson proposed that the one-dimensional sequence of these amino acids dictates exactly how the protein folds itself into a three-dimensional structure, and that highly specific 3D structure dictates exactly what the protein does, whether it forms muscle tissue, digests food, fights off a virus, or misfolds and causes Alzheimer's disease.
But the search space, the number of ways a protein could fold, is mind-boggling. It's often referred to as Levinthal's paradox. It's like a self-executing origami model. but an average-sized amino acid chain can fold into 10 to the power of 300 possible forms.
It's an unfathomable number.
That is a 1 followed by 300 zeros. It's a number so large it makes the number of atoms in the universe look like a rounding error. For decades, the only way scientists could figure out a protein's shape was to crystallize it and use giant X-ray machines to painstakingly map it, a process that could take a PhD student 5 years just to map one protein.
But then DeepMind unleashed AlphaFold. They built an incredibly deep neural network and fed it vast amounts of evolutionary data, how proteins have mutated across different species over millions of years, along with the laws of physics. The AI didn't just memorize shapes. It learned to intuit the underlying physical and evolutionary rules that govern how these chains interact. Eventually, AlphaFold learned to predict the 3D structures of nearly all 200 million known proteins in nature with astonishing atomic-level accuracy. It did in days what would have taken humanity millennia.
If we step back and look at Hassabis' overarching goal, why is AlphaFold the absolute purest realization of his dream?
Because it definitively proves that AI is the ultimate meta-solution for the natural sciences. Hassabis argued that chatbots and language models are just cheese tomorrow. They are fun parlor tricks that might eventually be economically useful. But AlphaFold is what he calls an unequivocal good right now. Yeah. By giving scientists the 3D maps of all proteins, it paves the way for discovering breakthrough medicines, designing enzymes that can eat plastic, and engineering new materials to fight climate change. It is fundamental science happening at digital speed.
There is this beautiful concept discussed in the book called Gaia. When we look at a forest, nature seems incredibly messy, fuzzy, and irregular, but it functions perfectly as an interdependent ecosystem. Hassabis believed that an infinity machine could look at the messiness of nature and find the hidden mathematical rules explaining the emergence of life. AlphaFold is exactly that. It found the hidden laws in the chaos of biology.
It was total vindication. It proved his foundational theory. If you feed an infinity of data into a powerful enough inductive computer, the machine will see the unseen patterns that explain reality.
But there is a dark mirror to this biological elegance, because the exact same inductive reasoning that allows a machine to map a protein and cure a disease also allows it to synthesize a novel lethal pathogen. And while Hassabis was celebrating the scientific purity of AlphaFold, his rivals at OpenAI were opening Pandora's box for the general public by releasing ChatGPT. This sparked a chaotic global arms race that forced Hassabis to confront the absolute darkest fears of his own creation. Let's examine the sweetness of danger and the safety debate that tore the industry apart.
The book does not shy away from the deeply troubling ethical compromises of AI development. There is a haunting anecdote involving Geoffrey Hinton, who is widely considered the academic godfather of deep learning, and who also shared the 2024 Nobel laureate spotlight.
Right.
Back in 2015, Hinton was having a private conversation with the philosopher Nick Bostrom, who wrote the seminal book on AI risk, Superintelligence. Hinton frankly admitted that once AI technology reached a certain threshold, it would be nearly impossible to prevent bad actors from abusing it. He explicitly said he believed political systems would use it to terrorize people, automate warfare, and exert authoritarian control.
So Bostrom asks the obvious piercing question. If you believe it will be used to terrorize people, then why are you doing the research?
And Hinton's reply was chilling. He said, "I could give you the usual arguments, but the truth is that the prospect of discovery is too sweet." He was directly, consciously echoing J. Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the atomic bomb.
Wow.
Oppenheimer famously said that when a scientist sees something that is technically sweet, they go ahead and do it, and they only argue about what to do with it after they have had their technical success.
Discovery is too sweet. It is the ultimate Icarus instinct. The intellectual thrill of ushering something tremendous into the world completely overwhelms the moral dread of what that creation might destroy.
And this dread was not just theoretical, it was causing severe friction inside DeepMind and Google. Mustafa Suleyman, the co-founder who was focused on social impact, gave a highly tense presentation to Google executives, including the founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
What happened?
Suleyman warned them that unchecked AGI could cause mass unemployment, severe economic dislocation, and unprecedented inequality, concentrating all global power in the hands of a few tech elites. To drive his point home, his final presentation slide was a Steve from The Simpsons showing a town mob carrying pitchforks and torches. He literally told the Google brass, "The pitchforks are coming."
I can imagine how well that went over in a Silicon Valley boardroom. The Google executives basically brushed it off, right?
Yeah, completely.
They fell back on the classic economic argument that previous technologies like the loom or the tractor eventually created more jobs than they destroyed. But a tractor replaces human muscle. AGI is a technology that replaces the human mind. The economic rules are completely different.
Exactly. But that internal corporate friction was nothing compared to the absolute chaos erupting externally in the market. OpenAI released ChatGPT, and their CEO Sam Altman went on a 25-city global world tour. The book describes Altman acting almost like a convincing preacher, hyping the technology to world leaders and the public. He was essentially creating a religion around the inevitability of AGI.
Which ironically terrified his own board of directors. Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's brilliant chief scientist, became so alarmed by the speed and the lack of safety guardrails that he led a dramatic board coup to fire Altman. They tried to hit the brakes.
I did.
But within 5 days, the immense weight of the Silicon Valley financial network rallied. Microsoft threatened to hire the entire OpenAI staff, and Altman was immediately reinstated. The coup failed completely. The message was clear.
Yeah.
The acceleration was unstoppable.
And the panic over this acceleration birthed extreme fringe movements. You have AI theorists like Eliezer Yudkowsky publishing articles in major magazines proposing that to stop AGI from destroying humanity, governments must be willing to bomb rogue data centers with airstrikes.
What? Airstrikes.
Yes. Yudkowsky argued that a voluntary pause was useless. Only the physical destruction of the GPU hardware could save us from a malevolent superintelligence.
So you have this boiling cauldron of accelerationists who want to build God's borrow and doomers who want to bomb the data centers. Where does Hassabis, the man who arguably started this entire race, sit in this debate?
Hassabis is caught in a trap of his own making, and the book provides a really fascinating breakdown of his rationale. Hassabis realizes that pausing AI development voluntarily is strategically pointless. As he puts it, if the responsible actors pause, you'd be beholden to random actors.
Right.
A pause by the good guys just guarantees that authoritarian regimes or reckless corporations get there first. He concludes he has no alternative but to cross the Rubicon and build the AGI.
But wait, I have to push back on this on behalf of the listener. He is essentially saying, the weapon is dangerous, so I must be the one to build it. He is trusting his own public-spirited nature over the open market. But history is littered with brilliant men who thought they were uniquely qualified to hold the keys to infinite power. Doesn't this just make him a benevolent dictator?
Hassabis is actually somewhat self-aware about this uncomfortable dynamic. When pressed about the concentration of power, he admits, it's humanity's invention and it's going to affect all humanity, so humanity should run it. Unfortunately, what are the right institutions? Until we figure that out, I do need power, at least a bit of it. He compares his need for power to money, claiming he doesn't care about money inherently, but he needs some of it to maintain control of the company and ensure the technology is steered safely until society catches up.
I need power to protect you from the power. It is a terrifying paradox, and it requires us to place an immense amount of faith in one man's psychology. But let's look at what he actually wants to do with that power. Because if you think fixing the global economy or curing disease is ambitious, you haven't seen his endgame. His ultimate goal extends far beyond earthly concerns. It extends to the stars.
When you peel back all the layers of DeepMind, the protein folding, the video games, the corporate battles, you finally uncover Hassabis's mind-bending ultimate ambition. He wants to use the AGI to build a space super collider.
Wait, a super collider? Like the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland that smashes particles together but floating in outer space?
Exactly, but a Large Hadron Collider ++. The scale is almost incomprehensible. He imagines designing an enormous, moon-sized experimental apparatus, potentially located near Alpha Centauri, our neighboring solar system. He theorizes using the gravity of a local moon to slingshot particles to near light speed, powering the massive magnetic ring with the direct energy output of a local star.
That sounds like a Dyson sphere straight out of a hard sci-fi novel. How does an AI built on Earth help build a machine light years away? And more importantly, why? What is he trying to smash together?
The engineering would be designed by the AGI, but the why is the holy grail of physics. He wants to solve the deepest, most stubborn debate in science, reconciling Einstein's relativity with Planck's quantum mechanics.
Okay, remind me of the conflict there.
Einstein's theory of general relativity describes space and time as a smooth, continuous fabric. If you imagine a digital computer monitor, Einstein thought reality was like a pure vector graphic. No matter how close you zoom in, the curve of the line remains perfectly smooth and continuous.
But Max Planck, the father of quantum mechanics, suggested the exact opposite.
Right. Planck's math suggests that at the absolute tiniest level, the Planck scale, the universe is quantized. To use our monitor analogy, reality is a raster graphic. If you zoom in enough on the fabric of space-time, you hit the physical pixels of the universe. It is blocky and discrete.
So for a century, physicists have been screaming at each other. Is reality a smooth vector, or is it a pixelated raster? But we can't build a machine on Earth powerful enough to smash particles hard enough to see the Planck scale.
Exactly. Which is why Hassabis needs the space supercollider to generate the data, and he needs the infinity machine, the AGI, to process the unimaginable flood of data that will come out of it. And this leads to a profound philosophical stake he planted during his Nobel lecture. He made a conjecture that defines his entire worldview. Any pattern that can be generated or found in nature can be efficiently discovered and modeled by a classical learning algorithm.
That sounds like dense technical jargon, but when you unpack it, it's actually a declaration of war against quantum mysticism, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Hassabis is pushing back hard against thinkers like the physicist Roger Penrose. Penrose theorized that human consciousness is so special and uncomputable that it must rely on quantum weirdness inside the brain's microtubules. Penrose argues classical computers can never achieve true AGI.
And Hassabis disagrees.
Strongly. Hassabis fiercely hates this reliance on quantum weirdness to explain the mind. He told the author that relying on quantum mechanics for consciousness is a horrendously inefficient way to render the universe.
He sees himself as Turing's champion. Alan Turing, the father of computer science, imagined a classical computer that, given enough time and memory, could compute anything computable. Hassabis firmly believes that a massive classical Turing machine, an AI using induction to find patterns in vast data, can solve the universe without needing any mystical quantum magic.
Yes, he is using AI not just as a software product to write code or fold proteins, he is building a cosmological lens. He wants to prove once and for all that the universe is understandable, rationally structured, and fundamentally based on classical information. He wants to prove that reality is not a fuzzy quantum blur, but a perfectly patterned code waiting to be deciphered by the right machine.
I want to paint a final picture here. Imagine you are sitting in a noisy, shabby pub in London. The guy sitting across from you drinking a cappuccino casually mentions that he works night shifts because reality itself is staring at him, screaming at him at 2 a.m., begging to be understood. He says, I would like to understand before I croak. I would like to understand, and then I'm perfectly fine to shuffle off my mortal coil.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the scientific obsession. He doesn't want to die before he understands the source code of the cosmos. The AGI, the billions of dollars, the corporate battles, they are all just scaffolding to build his telescope.
So let's pull all these cosmic threads back down to Earth and talk about what this means for you, the person listening right now, as we wrap up this deep dive into the book. We have traced the incredible journey of a kid who felt the weight of the world playing chess, who designed theme park video games to test the boundaries of simulation, and who grew into a Nobel laureate racing to build an omniscient machine.
And the reality is the technology being built right now by a remarkably tiny, insular group of people in London and Silicon Valley is going to redefine the absolute limits of human existence, is the ultimate infinity machine.
And it is going to do one of two things. It will either navigate us to an incredible sci-fi post-scarcity utopia where disease, aging, and energy shortages are relics of a primitive past, or it will upend society entirely, bringing those economic pitchforks right to our front doors.
But despite the massive risks for Demis Hassabis, the underlying motivation remains pure. He sees AI not as an artificial mimicry of humanity or a cheap tool to replace human labor. He sees it as the final, necessary evolution of our scientific method, the ultimate tool for humanity to decode the mind of the universe.
Which brings us back to where we started, that solid wooden table, the broken X-ray of reality. As we race headlong into a future where we build machines that can process an infinity of data, we have to leave you with a lingering question to mull over. Are we blindly building our successors, digital gods who will simply leave us behind in the dust as they mine the stars? Or are we building the most powerful telescope ever conceived, a beautiful inductive lens that finally clears away the murky waters and lets the human mind see the true, solid code of reality? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the infinity machine. Keep questioning the reality around you.